the silent watcher. She hasn't said a single word to you. No call, no message, not even a reaction to that long message you sent, the one that took everything in you to write. It's been a while now, weeks, maybe even months. Still, nothing. Your phone stays silent when it comes to her, but somehow she's still there. Not where it counts, not where it's real, but in your notifications. She's always one of the first people to view your story. You share a funny video, she watches. You share a quote about moving on. She sees that too. You post a picture from a better day, and hours later, she's liked it. She even scrolls back and taps like on an old post, like she wants to say something without saying anything. She's not talking to you, but her presence is constant, like a ghost that doesn't haunt. It just lingers. Her silence follows you around like static in the background of your life. It's not loud, but it's not quiet either. And it messes with your mind more than any angry word or clear goodbye ever could. Because if she's moved on, if she's done, why hasn't she let go? Why is she still watching from behind the screen, still showing up in digital ways if she refuses to show up in real life? And here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone who disappears has stopped caring. Some people don't walk away because they're done with you. They walk away because they're not done, but they don't have the courage to admit it. Talking to you again would mean reopening things she wants to pretend are closed. It would mean owning her choices, admitting she hurt you, admitting she misses you, admitting she still feels something she hasn't fully processed. But that kind of honesty requires emotional maturity. It requires vulnerability. It requires facing herself. And for some people, that's the hardest thing in the world to do. So instead of reconnecting, she does the safest thing she can. She watches, she lurks, she stays in the shadows of your world, not too far to be gone, but never close enough to be real. It's a form of emotional convenience. She gets to feel involved, she gets to check in, she gets a glimpse of your life, of your smile, your thoughts, your growth, without ever having to give anything back. She keeps a thread of connection tied loosely to you. Not because she plans to return, but because it comforts her to know she still could. And that, right there, that's not love, that's control. She wants just enough of you to feel safe, but not enough to be seen, to be exposed, to be vulnerable. She doesn't want to engage with your healing. She just wants to observe it, like someone watching a fire they lit but don't want to get burned by. And the more she watches, the more confused you become. Because deep down, you think, if she didn't care, she wouldn't still be watching. Maybe she's just waiting for the right moment to come back. Maybe I should post something she'll understand, something that'll remind her of what we had. But this is where you need to wake up. This is where you stop hoping. This is where you take your power back. Because here's what no one tells you. Real love doesn't hover. It doesn't stay silent while expecting you to keep the door open. It doesn't hide behind views and likes. Real love shows up. It speaks. It tries. And right now, she's giving you none of that. She's not texting. She's not calling. She's not apologizing. She's not rebuilding what she helped break. She's just watching. And watching isn't enough. You're stuck in the middle, not in her life, not out of it, just enough involvement to keep you emotionally tied, just enough silence to keep you questioning. It's a trap, and it's time to walk away from it. Because her silence is not your puzzle to solve. You don't need to decode her behavior. You don't need to post for her attention. You don't need to dress up your pain in hopes she'll notice and care again. The moment you stop checking if she's viewed your story, the moment you stop crafting captions hoping she reads between the lines, the moment you let go of the need to be seen by someone who refuses to truly look at you, that's when your healing begins. Peace doesn't come when she finally texts back. It comes when you stop needing her to. It comes when her silence no longer has power over you, when her presence or her absence doesn't control your next move. Let her stay in the background if that's where she wants to be. Let her linger in silence if that's all she can offer. But you stop waiting. You stop hoping she'll circle back. You stop putting your life on hold in case she changes her mind. You weren't made to live halfway. You weren't made to perform for someone's curiosity. You were made to live fully, to grow in stillness, to rebuild without applause, to rise without permission. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is move forward with no announcement, no final message, no emotional display, just peace, just clarity, just you finally choosing yourself. That's not cold, that's not cruel, that's self-respect, that's stoicism, that's freedom. She wants to be close without being vulnerable. She doesn't message you, she doesn't check on you, she doesn't ask how your day went or if you're okay. There are no explanations, no closure, just distance. But despite her silence, she hasn't truly disappeared. She's not gone, not fully. She still finds ways to linger, in your notifications, in your story views, in those quiet digital footprints that say, "I'm still here," without saying anything at all. She doesn't want to be back in your life, not really, but she also doesn't want to be forgotten. So she keeps just enough presence to make sure you don't move on too far. She keeps orbiting your world like a satellite, distant, detached, but always circling. You see, she wants the front row seat to your life, without ever stepping onto the stage. She wants to know what you're doing, how you're growing, who you're becoming, but she doesn't want to be a real part of that journey, because being involved would mean facing the mess she left behind. It would mean owning her silence, owning her exit, owning the hurt she caused. It would mean sitting in her own discomfort long enough to say something real, to you and maybe to herself. And that kind of truth, that kind of vulnerability, it terrifies her. Not because you're intimidating, not because you were ever unsafe, but because she's not ready to take off the mask, not ready to be seen, not ready to be known. She's spent too long hiding the parts of herself that feel weak, broken, or unfinished. And being real with you, someone who saw her, loved her, and still showed up, would mean exposing all of that. So instead of facing the truth, she plays it safe. She lingers in your world, just enough to still feel relevant. She watches from a distance, careful and calculated, just enough to make you wonder, does she still care? Is she thinking about me? Should I say something? That's the trap, because it feels like connection, but it's not. It's not love, it's not healing, it's not even respect. It's emotional convenience. She wants to feel like she still matters. She wants to feel close to you, but without doing the work to actually be close. She wants the warmth of your presence, but she refuses to step into the fire it would take to stay. She doesn't want the responsibility of your heart. She doesn't want to answer the questions she knows you deserve to ask. She just wants to know she still holds space in your mind, that she still has access to your energy, even if she's giving nothing in return. And that kind of one-sided connection, that's not love. That's control. It's comfort at your expense. Because while she watches, you're the one left questioning. You're the one holding on to threads that no longer lead anywhere. You're the one wondering if maybe, just maybe, there's still a chance. And that kind of hope, when it's not grounded in effort, presence, or truth, becomes a slow form of self-betrayal. Because care without action isn't love, it's a performance. And you deserve more than someone watching you heal from the sidelines, too afraid to step back in, but too selfish to step away. You deserve someone who chooses you fully. Not someone who lingers when it's easy and disappears when it's hard. Not someone who watches your life like a highlight reel, but refuses to help you carry anything behind the scenes. That's why Stoicism matters. Not because you're numb, not because you've stopped feeling, but because you're done accepting half-love and calling it enough. You're done confusing attention with affection. You're done letting someone's inconsistency dictate your direction. You don't need someone who hovers. You need someone who stands beside you, someone who shows up with real words, real presence, and real care. Someone who doesn't just want access to your life, but is ready to be in it. So let her watch if she wants to. Let her stay in the background where she chose to remain. But you keep walking. Not with bitterness, not with spite, but with the kind of quiet strength that comes from knowing what you deserve and refusing to settle for less. That's not cold, that's clarity, that's self-respect. You became the mirror she's avoiding. You didn't just love her, you saw her, not just the surface she showed the world, but the version buried beneath the layers. You connected with a part of her that even she didn't fully understand yet. It wasn't just her smile that pulled you in. It was the sadness she carried behind it. It wasn't her confidence you loved most. It was the quiet moments when her guard slipped, when you saw the pain behind her eyes, the uncertainty in her voice, the fear beneath her strength. You picked up on things she thought she was hiding, the little flinches when conversations got too deep, the way she dodged compliments like she didn't believe them, the way she clung to independence not out of freedom but out of fear. Fear of needing someone, fear of being seen as weak. You saw the cracks in her armor and you didn't run. You leaned in, you stayed. You made her feel safe enough to drop the act, if only for a second, and that's when she started to panic. Because most people loved the version of her that was easy to handle, the curated version, the funny version, the strong and unbothered version. But you saw her when the lights were off, when she wasn't performing, when she was just human, broken in places, brilliant in others, unfinished everywhere in between. You didn't just love her for who she pretended to be. You loved the version of her she didn't think was lovable. And that's what scared her the most. Because being truly seen, really seen, means there's nowhere left to hide. No more distractions, no more walls to lean on. It forces a person to face who they are without the filters. And if someone hasn't done that inner work yet, if they're still running from their own reflection, then being with someone like you becomes too much. Not because you are too much, but because your presence brings up everything they've been avoiding. You didn't scare her because you were intense. You scared her because your love was clear, because you showed her her own potential. You reflected back the wounds she hadn't healed, the cycles she was stuck in, the version of herself she could become, but was too afraid to step into. That kind of clarity is powerful, but it's also confronting. You weren't judging her, you weren't pushing her, you were simply being present, being kind, being steady, being open, and that kind of presence becomes a mirror that doesn't flatter but reveals. And when someone isn't ready to look at what's really there, when they're still surviving off denial, still building their life around avoidance, still numbing their way through unfinished pain, they will run. She didn't run from you, she ran from herself, from the parts of her that couldn't handle being loved that deeply, that honestly, because love like that demands growth, and growth demands discomfort. And for some people, comfort, even in dysfunction, feels safer than transformation. So she chose distance, not because you were wrong for her, but because she wasn't ready to be right for herself. Because it was easier to retreat into the familiar than to stretch into something unfamiliar, like healing, like being seen and still being loved. And here's what you need to understand. That doesn't mean you were too much. That doesn't mean you should have loved her less. That doesn't mean you should shrink to make others more comfortable. You were real, and real is rare. Real is uncomfortable to those who are still pretending. Real is powerful. Not because it shouts, but because it reveals. And not everyone is ready to be revealed. Not everyone is ready to be loved in a way that makes them question who they've been. But you weren't meant to dim. You weren't meant to dull your light just because someone wasn't ready for its reflection. You weren't meant to hold back your emotional truth to make someone else feel safe in their emotional avoidance. Keep being that mirror. Keep being that presence. Keep being the kind of love that doesn't just entertain people, but wakes them up. Because the one who's meant for you, they won't run when they see their reflection in your eyes. They won't panic when your love reaches the parts of them no one else has touched. They'll stay, they'll breathe, they'll meet you there, not because they're perfect, but because they're ready. And you won't have to chase them, because real doesn't have to run. She's waiting for you to break first. Don't let the silence fool you. Don't mistake the stillness for peace or her absence for closure, because sometimes silence isn't the end of the story. It's just the next move in a game she's still playing. A quiet move, sure, but calculated, intentional. She's not reaching out. She's not apologizing. She's not sending the "I miss you" text you once imagined in your head 100 times. But don't think that means she's finished with you, because she's still watching, still reading, still noticing the things you post, the tone in your captions, the silence between your updates. She sees it all, and beneath that silence, there's one quiet question she keeps asking herself. Will he break first? That's what she's waiting for. Not your healing, not your closure. She's waiting for the crack, the moment you soften, the moment you fold, the moment you let your loneliness speak louder than your boundaries. She's hoping you'll drop a hint, a vague caption about missing someone, a sad quote about closure, a throwback photo to a time she knows was meaningful. Just enough emotional weight to give her a signal, not enough to step forward, but enough to prove she still has power. Because if you break the silence, she gets to stay protected. She doesn't have to admit anything, not the guilt for how she left, not the confusion she felt afterward, not the part of her that still wonders if she walked away from something real. Your message, even something small, would mean she still matters. It would let her feel wanted without ever having to be vulnerable, comfort without cost, reassurance without responsibility. And the worst part, you might not even realize it's a trap. You might think, maybe if I just reach out, it'll clear the air. But all it does is hand her control without consequence. Because now she knows you're still waiting, still affected, still hers, even in silence. That's not love, that's ego. That's manipulation in a quiet disguise. Because love doesn't test who's going to break first. Love doesn't sit on the sidelines waiting for someone to prove they still care. Love doesn't measure connection by who blinks first in a staring contest. But that's the game she's playing. She waits, she watches, she pretends to be unbothered, while quietly hoping you'll be the one to crack. What she doesn't expect is what you're doing now. You're not chasing, you're not breaking, you're not reaching out just to ease the discomfort of silence. You're staying calm, staying still, not from pain, but from power, from self-awareness, from clarity. And that clarity is louder than any text you could send. Every day you don't react, you grow stronger. Every post that speaks from peace and purpose instead of pain says more than any breadcrumb message ever could. That's not you being distant. That's you being rooted. Rooted in your healing. Rooted in your worth, rooted in your decision to no longer play a game you never signed up for. She may still be watching, but now she's watching someone she can no longer read, someone she no longer knows how to reach, because you're no longer broadcasting pain. You're not bleeding for attention. You're not performing for anyone's curiosity. You're just becoming. You're building something real, and this time it's for you. For your peace, for your freedom, for the life you're growing into, one that no longer includes proving your value to someone who couldn't hold it. Let her wonder, let her wait for the text that will never come. Let her sit with the silence she created, not you. You're not playing the game, you're writing your own story now. And the most powerful move is the one where you don't move at all, you don't chase, you don't explain, you just rise. Quietly, steadily, with purpose. That's not indifference, that's not bitterness, that's freedom. And it's the kind of freedom that makes silence a statement, a louder one than any words ever could. She misses the old you, but can't handle the new one. She doesn't miss the man you are now. She misses the version of you that broke yourself into pieces trying to keep something whole. She misses the man who lived for her responses, who opened his phone first thing in the morning hoping her name was there, even if it was just a like, a view, a breadcrumb. She misses the version of you that chased after clarity she never gave, that read into every emoji, every delay, every silence, and still found a reason to hope. She misses the way you stayed up rethinking every word you said, wondering if you were too much, wondering if you weren't enough. You were the man who would have dropped everything, plans, pride, peace, just to make sure she didn't feel like she was losing you, even when she was the one pulling away. She misses that because it gave her power, comfort, control. It made her feel wanted without having to be present. It gave her a sense of certainty in a world where she was unsure of herself. She knew she could disappear and come back. She knew you'd still be there, patient, open, software, waiting on a maybe, holding space for someone who never fully stepped in. But now, you're not that man anymore. You're not chasing, you're not clinging, you're not performing your pain through quotes and carefully selected captions. You're not trying to get noticed by someone who barely acknowledged your depth when it mattered. You've changed, not in ways that scream, but in ways that hold. Your silence has weight now. Your peace is visible. Your detachment isn't a game, it's a boundary, and she feels it. She doesn't see desperation anymore. She sees distance, not cold, angry distance, but the kind that says, I'm not available for what doesn't nourish me. And that kind of change, that kind of emotional stability, it unsettles her because your evolution became a mirror. And in that reflection, she sees something she didn't expect. The reality that while she stayed the same, you grew. You did the work. You faced the parts of yourself she never dared to look at in herself. You sat with the pain, the questions, the grief, and you turned it into clarity. Now she's staring at the gap between who she thought you'd stay and who you actually became. And that gap, it's not just uncomfortable, it's undeniable. It shows her that you're not someone she can fall back into, not without change, not without effort, not without meeting you where you are now. And that's terrifying for someone who thought they'd always have access to you. Someone who relied on your softness as their safety net. Someone who thought your heart would stay parked in the same spot, waiting for them to return. But your heart isn't on standby anymore. You've raised your standards. You've stopped giving energy to half efforts. You've learned to walk away without explanation, not out of bitterness, but out of respect for yourself. She still watches you, yes, but the view has changed. She doesn't see the man who used to orbit around her world. She sees the man who became his own world, who no longer needs validation to feel whole, who found freedom, not in her return, but in his own release. That transformation, that's louder than any closure conversation. It speaks in your stillness, in your consistency, in your peace. It says, I'm not angry. I'm not waiting. I'm building something you don't get to interrupt. Because your healing wasn't a message to her, it was a commitment to yourself. And that kind of growth, it can't be mimicked, it can't be faked. It only comes from walking through the fire and refusing to let it turn you into ash. So let her miss the old you. Let her sit with the version of you she abandoned and realize too late that it wasn't weakness, it was love. Let her realize that the man who once begged for a response now has nothing left to say. Because you've got a new chapter to write, and it doesn't begin with going back. It begins with knowing that the version of you she couldn't handle was the very version you had to become to finally be free. Your growth is the goodbye. Let her watch. Let her sit behind her screen like a silent observer. tapping through your stories, watching every post, every update, trying to piece together a message from your stillness, trying to find signs in your silence, hoping maybe, just maybe, something you share is about her. Let her wonder. Let her question whether you've truly moved on, whether your heart still holds a space with her name on it, whether her absence has left a dent, or if you've finally found peace without her. But here's the truth. You don't owe her a show. You don't need to stage your growth like a performance. Don't post something vulnerable hoping she'll read between the lines. Don't share something poetic just to make her second-guess her choices. Don't tailor your life to provoke a reaction from someone who chose to walk away from it. Because every time you do that, every time you craft your message to pull her attention, you stop living for you. You reduce your healing to a spectacle. You take something sacred and make it strategic. And your life? It's far too valuable to be turned into content for someone who left the room. Let her watch from a distance if that's what she needs to do. But know this, you're not waiting on her eyes anymore. Your growth no longer needs to be seen to be real. Your peace no longer needs her presence to be complete. You've learned that your power isn't in being loud, it's in being unmoved. Real strength isn't about how many words you can say, it's about how many moments you can stand still without having to explain yourself. It's how quietly and confidently you walk away from what once wrecked you, without bitterness, without revenge, without theatrics. You're no longer knocking on closed doors. You're no longer checking your phone, hoping for a message that will fix everything. You're no longer rehearsing what you'd say if she ever decided to return. You're no longer a prisoner to unfinished conversations. You've stopped needing closure from her because you gave it to yourself. You realized that peace doesn't come when she finally replies. Peace comes the moment her silence stops owning you. The moment you wake up and her name doesn't echo through your thoughts. The moment her opinion no longer shapes your decisions. The moment your story becomes more important than her chapter. And if she's still watching, that's fine. Let her. Let her sit behind the glass, trying to trace the outline of the man she once knew, and slowly realizing she no longer recognizes him. Because the version of you that once waited, begged, overthought, hoped, is gone. Not destroyed, just evolved. You didn't slam the door, you didn't burn the bridge, you simply stopped showing up for someone who stopped choosing you. And in doing so, you chose yourself. Now you're building. Creating a life where your joy isn't dependent on who's watching, where your peace isn't a reaction, but a decision, where your worth isn't measured in attention, but in alignment. Stronger habits, wiser boundaries, a freer heart. You've outgrown the version of yourself that needed closure, that needed attention, that needed her to understand before you could move on. Your silence now. It's not emptiness, it's an answer. It's a full sentence. It says everything she never gave you the chance to express. It says, I've made peace with what broke me. It says, I no longer need to be seen to feel whole. It says, I've moved on, not because I stopped caring, but because I started caring about me. So let her scroll, let her wonder, let her realize that access to you isn't a default. It's a privilege, and that privilege has been quietly, gracefully revoked. Not with drama, not with spite, but with dignity, because you're not performing anymore. You're not chasing. You're not trying to prove your worth to someone who couldn't hold it. You're becoming. Becoming who you were always meant to be, with or without her applause. That's not cold. That's not pride. That's not bitterness. That's clarity. That's strength. That's self-respect, that's healing, and that is how you truly say goodbye without saying a word. If something in this made you pause, even just for a heartbeat, if you felt a quiet shift inside your chest, a moment where you stopped scrolling, stopped thinking, and just felt, even for a second, that's not random. That's your soul responding. That's your heart whispering, it's time. Time to stop replaying the past. Time to stop trying to rewrite a story that already ended. Time to stop waiting for a message, a call, a sign from someone who made the choice to go silent. If you felt even a little more at peace by reading this, if something in these words helped you sit a little taller, breathe a little easier, let go just a little more, then take that as the permission you've been waiting for. The permission to choose you. Because you didn't come across this by accident. You're not here just wasting time. You're here because something in you, even if it's just a small, quiet voice, is done with the patterns that keep hurting you, is tired of the emotional loops, the breadcrumb hope, the waiting for people to come back and make things right. You're here because something in you knows that healing doesn't start when they say, sorry. It starts when you say, enough. So if this resonated, if it felt like someone finally put into words what you've been feeling but couldn't explain, then I'm inviting you to do one simple thing: subscribe. Not to boost a number, not to support me, not for some badge of strength, but for you. Because when you hit that button, you're doing more than following a page. You're making a choice to feed your healing instead of your hurt, a choice to surround yourself with words that reflect your growth, not your pain, a choice to stop reliving the same story and start writing a new one with you at the center. This space isn't here to entertain. It's here to hold you, to challenge you, to reflect back the strength that's always been inside of you, even when you forgot it was there. This isn't a stage where we pretend to have it all together. This isn't a space for empty quotes and fake positivity. This is a mirror, a soft, steady mirror held up to remind you you're not broken. You're not weak for feeling deeply. You're not failing just because you're still healing. You're becoming, and becoming takes time. It takes truth. It takes letting go of people who only came to teach, not to stay. If you're still reading this, that means you're ready. Ready to stop chasing closure from people who can't give it. Ready to stop molding yourself to fit inside someone else's confusion. Ready to stop showing up for someone who can't even see you. It means you're ready to come home to yourself, to the version of you that doesn't settle for half love, that doesn't chase validation in unread messages, that doesn't hand over your peace just to feel temporarily important. You're ready to stop waiting and start building a life that's rooted in clarity, in boundaries, in real grounded peace. A life where the love you give to yourself first. So go ahead, hit subscribe, not because you're broken, but because you're ready. Ready to rise, ready to heal, ready to stop chasing and start choosing you. And just in case no one's told you lately, you're not too late. You're not too much. You're not falling apart. You're real. You're rebuilding. You're becoming something powerful. And you're doing just fine.